that is where the brewery comes from.
So we go back. Dad was always teaching me how to brew a little bit. Well, then when I got out of high school and my days living in Norman at OU and stuff, I worked at a place called Coach's in Norman, and it was a brewery. Now it's called the Norman Brew House, and back then it was a restaurant and a brewery. And so I started out, I got a job there bartending, and I ended up becoming a manager there. But my dad at the time worked for the city of Norman, and when they would get off work, they'd come over and hang out while I was bartending or whatever. And then I'd get off work and I'd sit there with my dad and drink beer, and we'd look around at all the tanks and stuff in there. We talked about how it'd be cool to have a place like that, but we'd do it this way or we'd do this different. We had all these ideas, and we just talked about it all the time. Sure. We'd go to bars where there's a lot of craft beer, and we'd sit down and talk about how cool it would be to have our beer there. Like Tapworks, was the last time I ever actually went out with my dad was at Tapworks before he got sick. Because I was living downtown, and his whole life, he never called off work, not once. And this time, for whatever reason, when I asked him, hey, call off work, let's go have a beer, for some reason, he did. And so we're sitting at Tapworks, and somebody came up and ordered a beer, and we were like, man, there's no Oklahoma breweries. Why is that, Yeah. And we talked about how cool it would be to be sitting there, and if some guy came up and ordered your beer while you're sitting there, how cool would that be? And so, long story short on that part was that's the first account I ever got with Skydance. Yeah. And I remember going in there, Garrett, who's the manager there, I brought him all these beers, and then he put 3 of them on tap. Yeah. And so I walk out to my Jeep, and I was just in tears, because I just remember Dad, like that moment of us sitting there dreaming this up, So Dad, I kind of was back and forth on home brewing. I'd brew a little bit, and then I wouldn't brew for several months, And then while Dad was in the nursing home right before he died, I'm going through a lot of his stuff or cleaning out his old house and stuff, and I find this book, and it's on home brewing. And it's a real famous home brewing book by a guy named Charlie Papazian. He's like the godfather of home brewing. And I'm like, oh man, I can't believe he has this book. I didn't know. And I'm thumbing through it, and there's this piece of paper folded up in there, and it was like a grocery list, but it was beer ingredients. Yeah. And what Dad would do was, like, if I wanted to brew beer, he would give me a list, and I would go to this brew shop that was in Norman at the time, and I would get this stuff and come back, and we'd make beer. And so this was one of those lists, and I could tell by looking at the ingredients that it was an oatmeal stout. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make this beer and take it to the nursing home and let him enjoy something, you know. And so I made the beer, I took it in there, and he just loved it, He's like, oh man, that's good. He said, who made that? I said, you did. No, I was like, yeah, that's your beer. And he said, that's real good. And he drank that whole beer. And I got kicked out of the nursing home that day because I brought beer into the nursing home. And I'm like, what's he gonna do? Die?
Yeah, exactly. Like, come on.
Yeah. And so I couldn't come back for a day or something. I can't remember what it was. Yeah. But anyways, I take some of that beer to this homebrew club meeting. And there's a club called the Red Earth Brewers, and it's still a club here in Oklahoma City. And so I go to this meeting, and all the people that are trying the beers and stuff are drinking it, and they're just like, wow, man, this is really good. And one of them says, there's this big competition that takes place down in Dallas, and you need to send your beer off down to this thing. And so I send it off down there, and really I send it off because I was really starting to get into brewing again, and I was like, I wanted the score sheet back. I wanted some feedback because in person, even in the club meetings, most of the people will just to your face, oh yeah, that's great.
It's the Oklahoma thing, and everyone's too nice.
Everybody's really nice,
which is horrible if you're a salesman.
And like your family, your friends, nobody's gonna tell you the beer sucks.
You want real feedback.
Yeah, and so I send it off to Dallas, and then it's like a month and a half or 2 months later, they have the actual, it's really, this one, it's the second largest homebrew competition in the country, I think. And it's like a 3-day event. And so everybody from the club goes down there on like Thursday night or Friday, and they hang out for several days and go to this conference. And then there's like this awards ceremony on Saturday. And so we went down, but then Saturday morning I had to drive back to Oklahoma City, get on a plane, fly to Phoenix for a gaming conference, because at this time I'm in the casino business.
Working for the tribe.
Yeah, working
casinos.
for the Iowa tribe of
Sure.
Oklahoma. And so we have this big, it's a National Indian Gaming Conference every year. And this particular year it was in Phoenix. And so I fly to Phoenix, and while I'm on the flight they're having the awards ceremony, you know. And I land, and Gail, who owns the brew shop here in Oklahoma City, she was down there. She leaves a voicemail on my phone. She says, "You won a medal. You won. You won." And I was real excited. You know, I was like, "Man, Dad's beer, man. Like, he won. He finally gets some recognition for something, you know." And I was just super excited. I couldn't wait to get back home, and I was going to take his medal and put it in his room at the nursing home and stuff. But I get to my hotel room, my brother calls and says, "Dad just passed away."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh man, it was good." You know, he was suffered for a long time. So it was good that it was over, the suffering was over, but it was also good that he won this
you
award.
just wanted to be able to tell him
before he died, you know. And so I'm sitting in Phoenix, man, and I'm with my boss and our tribal chairman, and I'm just telling them, you know, what had just happened. I'm trying to get a flight back to Oklahoma so we can get the arrangements taken care of and stuff. And one of them had mentioned something like, "Man, you always talk about how you're going to open a brewery. You know, what happened?" And it made me think, like, we talked about it, and you can't just talk about stuff forever, because it just ends up not happening. We all think we have a long time to do stuff. We all think we're going to live forever and stuff.
Yeah.
But here's a guy who at 56 years old is just young.
Yeah.
And he's in a nursing home, you know. And I thought I had another 10, 15, 20 years to do these kinds of things with him, you know.
Yeah.
But you wait and wait and wait, and the next thing you know, you're out of time. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start a brewery, but I'm going to make sure that I don't run out of time. And the way I'm going to do that is give myself a deadline. Yeah. And so I told myself that I'm going to have a deadline of, I'm going to be 40 years old, and I'm going to have my brewery open by the time I turn 40. And so I'm 35 at the time. I kind of got a plan. I'm going to spend a couple years just brewing beer, and I'm going to do all the, get these beers perfect, all the ones that would do good in a brewery, you know, and then I'm going to kind of put together a business plan and then raise some money, and I'll have it open by the time I'm 40. And so we brewed I turned 40 in October of 2018, and then we brewed our first batch about 3 weeks later in here.